Right, let's take a look at the geology of Champagne. I've got my plasticine out to make it a bit more fun. It's actually kind of easy to understand the basics here when you realise that this whole part of the world was underwater till relatively recently in geological terms. So we'll look at the oldest soils first and stack them up as they formed under the sea. So oldest soil relevant to Champagne is the Kimmeridgian from the Upper Jurassic period, and we're going to cross over into the Lower Cretaceous. Not really that relevant for Champagne, but it's there. And then we're into the Upper Cretaceous period, which is really all about chalk, dead sea creatures, Turonian, Santonian, Campanian as we get younger, very crucial. And then we cross over into tertiary soils after the dinosaurs, very different sands and clays on top of the chalk. So Champagne's ball game is all about that boundary between the Cretaceous, the Upper Cretaceous, and the tertiary soils, and also the Kimmeridgian earlier down in the Côte d'Ivoire. So what starts to happen is the Paris Basin sags in the middle. And what that does is kind of thrust up the edges and the boundaries. It's kind of uplift all around, actually. But so what you see is the further away you are from the centre, the older the soil. So in the Côte d'Ivoire, Aube, Sancerre, Dorset, you're seeing those Kimmeridgians, and then you're seeing the chalk a little closer in. And then right nearer into the centre, you're seeing the tertiary soils, sands, clays, marls. And that's a pattern repeated all the way around the basin. So when we flatten it off and, think about a bit of erosion happening at the surface, seas coming in and out, you start to see it kind of looking like that when you look top down. And Champagne, of course, we're out of to the east of the depression, south and east. So it kind of looks like this. Northwest is going to be more dominated by tertiary soils, and then as we head south and head a little bit more east, we're going to hit more of the Upper Cretaceous chalks, then into the Lower Cretaceous and into the Upper Jurassic. So I've put here how those soils sort of line up with places in Champagne that we know. So the more westerly and northerly parts of Champagne are going to see more of those tertiary soils at the surface. Marne Valley, Petite Montagne, Massif de Saint-Thierry. Then the core of the Montagne de Reims, the Grande Vallée, the Côte des Blancs, and the Cézanne as well. I'm really in that boundary between the Upper Cretaceous and the Tertiary, lots of chalk influence. And down we go until we eventually hit the Côte d'Ivoire in the Upper Jurassic, with that Kimmeridgian and the Portlandian soils there. So here's what that looks like on a map when it's all laid out. You can really see it, the Massif de Saint-Thierry and the Ard Valley and the Marne Valley, and actually the Côte Sud d'Épernay are really west of where you're going to see more tertiary deposits at the surface. And then into the Côte des Blancs, the Cézanne, the Montagne de Reims, more of the Upper Cretaceous, heading back in time past Montgueux and the Vitigrat and the earlier chalk, past the Lower Cretaceous, and into the Jurassic soils of the Côte d'Ivoire, which you're also going to find in Chablis. So it's not all flat, Champagne, and you've got to understand as well, earthquakes are important. They start to push up the hills and form those hills. There aren't many in north of France. Champagne's quite notable for that, and those earthquakes really push up those right at the boundary between the Cretaceous and the Tertiary, which is really important because then you get the wash down of those nutritious tertiary soils onto the chalk, which helps you grow vines. Without it, you couldn't do it really. Onto just pure naked chalk is very, very difficult. There's always got to be some topsoil coming from somewhere. So that's what you see, and you want those slopes as well. The dinosaurs didn't have the opportunity to make great champagne because they didn't have any tertiary soils to play with. There you go. Anyway, rivers too. The Marne River cutting down through the Valais and the Grande Vallée, getting quite fast, dramatic changes between the soils there. Definitely important thing to think about how the topography of the vineyards affects what you see. So we can look at some examples to see that. We'll start off in the north, in the western part of Champagne, north in the Petite Montagne de Reims. In Chamery, you can see where the vines are planted here. So we're in that part of Champagne where more tertiary soils are going to be at the surface. The chalk is here, but it's down on the plains. You wouldn't plant there. You don't plant down on the plains. You need to be on the slopes for all sorts of reasons. But the slopes here are going to be much younger soils. Here we go. Précision nutrition sands. Here's where they're coming. And that timeline again, you see in the Cretaceous, followed by the tertiary Paleocene, Eocene deposits. Let's look at somewhere else. Grand Crus of Bouzy and Ambonay, south side of the Montagne de Reims. We are very much in chalk, in Upper Cretaceous, Campanian chalk here. Okay, so the belemnite chalk of the Campanian period is the kind of Grand Cru, well, it's the Rolls-Royce Grand Cru. Squids, kind of related to squids, squid and cuttlefish, but earlier you're going to see this micrasta chalk, Santonian chalk, down at the bottom in the green, less well regarded in Champagne. Is it a myth that it's less good? Who knows? It tends to be at the bottom of the slopes anyway. Moving westwards, we're going to hit the Grande Vallée. So that's Aï, Marais-sur-Aï, Dizy, these villages here, Auvillers. Still plenty of chalk here. Still plenty of belemnite chalk. But as we're heading westwards, we're starting to hit the part of Champagne where those tertiary deposits are going to be more dominant, and the chalk is getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Even though the river's been cutting through west, and when we get to Damery, we're really seeing the last bits of chalk at the surface here. And when we get west of there, even the very lowest vineyards down by the river start with tertiary soils. And after the Cretaceous period, the chalk is just too far down to be of any real influence on the vines, on the vineyards. And that's the case right the way out in the Marne Valley and the Ardres, and lots of Petites Montagnes as well, and the Massif de Saint-Thierry in the north too. So let's head south. We'll go back in time now. So we'll start at Vertus, bottom of the Côte des Blancs. I can pop over. You can see that the Cézanne, a lot of the Cézanne is still that boundary zone, really, between the chalk and the tertiary. The chalk's still important there. But as we go back down southeast, back through time, we see the town of Troyes, entry to the Côte des Bars, and we can see around it these Turonian chalks, earlier chalks, still in the Upper Cretaceous here, but Mongueux and the Vitry out further northeast of this map, still in the Turonian little outcrops there. Not much of it about. There could be more if Champagne does expand, as it plans to. Lots of Chardonnay planted in Mongueux. And then we kind of cross over the Lower Cretaceous, which is not hugely important here in Champagne. And once you get into the Côte des Bars, so the Bar-sur-Seine and Bar-sur-Aube, you're seeing the Jurassic soils come into play, the Portlandian limestone, and beneath it the older Cambrian marl, which is more widely seen. The blues and greens there. And there we go. There's a reminder of the layers we've been looking at. I hope that was interesting. If you've got any questions, do send them over. There you go. An intro to the geology of Champagne.